It is 2025, and many of my creative friends and I have decided to branch out into different directions. My direction is this channel, to collect my thoughts and to turn them into videos and to invite you into the space. And now I feel empty while I'm supposed to be at my most creative phase of this project. My beloved deep thoughts are replaced with a crawling anxiety that always reminds me of its existence. And the creative nights, the 3 a.m. moments, are replaced with escapism. Things that distract my mind and my brain from imagining the worst outcome possible. The world has shifted into a direction that makes me as a German not only concerned, but it terrifies me to the core. As a German, I grew up like everyone else around me with a culture of remembrance. In this concept, the past is kept alive by telling even children what happened during the Second World War and what had led to it. And while the concept doesn't come without flaws, so a majority of my higher education was focused on the time period around the Second World War and other historical events I had to learn for myself privately, it was important that we learned about the darkest moments of our history and our country's identity. The post-war generation broke the silence of the war generation. They made sure that these things wouldn't be forgotten. They made this their personal project. I was in primary school, and this is below the age of 11, when I first saw real videos and photo material showing starved, naked and dead humans from a mass grave from a concentration camp. Pictures made and preserved by soldiers that had freed the camp. They pulled Germans, children and adults out of their homes and made them stay and look at the graves, look at the corpses. They were not allowed to leave, they had to look. They had to see the horrors to understand. And in school, they made us look, they made us understand. Those images have been burned into my mind since. I grew up knowing anything racist is the worst thing a human can believe in. It is the lowest of the human beliefs. It's the most vile and evil thing someone can do or believe in. It is something we have to resist with every fiber of our body. And when I saw the images in school, I came home, I locked myself into my room and I cried. I had nightmares for a few weeks, and yet this was important for me to understand. I had to feel the pain and the terror. Something that is probably very hard to grasp for people outside of Germany is the lack of national pride that exists here. It is part of our culture of remembrance, often misunderstood or framed as national guilt. It is not about guilt or even shame, but it is a collective awareness. The knowledge that nothing good can come from pride that is based on the place you dropped into the world. You can be proud of things that you have accomplished. Just being born is not an accomplishment to be proud of. I remember talking to American friends about that concept, and it made them visually upset. They felt like they needed to intervene, boost my confidence, and tell me it wasn't my fault. The idea that someone does not value national pride as they did questions something deep inside them that they grew up with. It's like I told them Santa and the Tooth Fairy don't exist after they built a whole culture around those two. And the older I got, the more invested I got. History shapes our identity, our personality. It got important to me to actually make a difference somehow. To be a loud and vocal voice, so history never repeats again. To educate people around me who are making jokes or just trying to be edgy, telling people in their faces that it's neither funny nor okay. When I was in my 20s, I was active and also dating within the metal subculture. I vetted potential partners very carefully, as the metal subculture, just as much as others, got infiltrated by right-wing propaganda. When I was the co-organizer of a large metal festival, we hired bouncers with a deep knowledge about right-wing and fascist band, and we would deny entry and kick out everyone who would wear a shirt of a right-wing or fascist band. We were one of the first festivals to do that, and many others followed. It just felt right to not give these bands a platform to be seen. And while these things were all small and probably did not have a great impact in the greater picture, they set a tone. And at this point, I wish more people would have done small things, and those small things would have added up to the point where it would have become unacceptable in society to praise hate, to praise discrimination, and to praise the most inhumane behavior a human can show. As we say in German, hätte Fahrradkette, which cannot directly be translated. It means something similar like, no use crying over spilled milk. What happened, happened. And what happened was the latest American election in November. My subtle optimism that people can't be all that bad was shattered. My optimism for humanity had turned out to be my personal blind spot. A naive hope that everything will always turn out fine. Why would anyone vote for someone who doesn't want you to exist? I have seen LGBTQ plus members endorsing Trump. Just today I saw a Latina crying on TikTok over how Trump did not keep his promises and started to deport her family, but that is exactly what he promised. Deporting people. That is exactly what people voted for. Did nobody read or listen to what he said? I was mind baffled. Why would you choose your own butcher? Why choose suffering? And why would you vote against someone who wanted you to succeed, to thrive, to live in peace and to have opportunities? And I'm still completely honest, I don't understand why that has happened. Why would people prefer suffering over opportunity, poverty over growth, and hate over love and acceptance? In Europe, and I say Europe on purpose, as I have noticed it's a common belief through most countries here, we do not envy the USA. I know they paint the picture of everyone wanting to move to the States and get citizenship there, but it couldn't be further from the truth. For most people in Europe, moving to the US would mean a significant worsening of their quality of life, and at the same time, it would be so much more expensive. And this isn't the so-called European arrogance that is often referred to, but we look at the data, we look at the numbers, and also at the reports of our fellow sisters and brothers overseas and how they struggle, and we do not want that. Especially in the EU, we have learned to love our freedom to travel to other EU countries, to live where we want. The freedom of movement is defined as such. All EU citizens and their family members have the right to move and reside freely within the EU. This fundamental right is established by Article 21 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union and Article 45 of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. In the countries around us, as much as we mock each other, it's a little bit like a sibling rivalry, they are our allies. Do the French make jokes about Germans and do we make jokes back? Absolutely. But if you touch them, you have to get past us first. And this is the European identity. Touch one of us and you have trouble with the rest as well. If you look at the reactions on social media, what happened in Europe when the topic of the US wanting to buy and later invade Greenland came up, people took this very personally, as they should. If you come for Greenland, we are all Greenlanders at the point, was what I read. Our continent is diverse, colorful and rich in culture. Many languages to be spoken, many stories to be told and many holidays to be celebrated. We look left and right how our neighbors do things, we learn from it, we adapt, we develop as humans. And this exchange is what we love. And even when we're not aware of it, as it seems just normal to us. And now we look over the pond, as we say. We look at how people are willingly choosing our darkest path, choosing pain, suffering and death, choosing the fear for their lives, choosing the loss of family and friends. And we stand here and ask ourselves, why? But we are no holy saints either. Political trends have become global. We have our own problems with right-wingers, especially since Trump's first term. Right-wingers all over Europe suddenly felt empowered to be more unhinged than ever. And us seeing what happened in America created this fascist echo chamber and started to normalize this behavior in the public. In fact, our right-wing party copied the American right-winger concept all the way up to the silly MAGA hats, and at the time it was a great way to make fun of them, but now nobody's laughing anymore. The USA is actively involving themselves into our elections that will be in a month, using Nazi language on rallies to embolden the local right-wingers. Trying to spin the same hollow phrases that worked in the US, even though they do not make any sense in a European context, as anything we have now was only possible because we worked hard after 2 world wars. Make Europe great again? Sorry, but this is our great. But you would need to know history, especially European history, to understand that. You would need to understand the European spirit to understand that, and you would need to be able to grasp our love for our neighbors to understand that. It might be tough from the perspective of a me-first culture and a me-first personality, how it is to have friends, how it is to have nations around you that speak about you in favor because you stand up for each other. But I can tell you, this is our great. And it is truly better than anything this orange person could ever offer. The media is already influenced, filtered, and shows what it wants us to see, controlled by few, deciding over the opinions of many. The sources where we get our information from are in the US. Most big tech companies are in the US. There might be even a chance that you will never see this video. Filtering opinions through press and now online media is a very important part of the control of a fascist government that it needs in order to persist. Creating echo chambers that make you think you live in a normal world while being trapped is how control is kept alive. Even having big established newspapers talk around an odd gesture or a gesture that could be misunderstood regarding Musk's Nazi salute, this is a sign of control and a sign of fear. Journalism was supposed to say the truth and say the things that hurt. And now it's tiptoeing around. And just very few outlets are being brave. So what are the steps to create a carbon copy of what we had in 1933? You'd be surprised how far the US has already come. So the ultimate goal is to create a bystander society. And this is where the majority of people are passive about the worst things happening in society, looking away, ignoring it, and minimizing its impact. And later they will say they didn't know. First, you censor information. And that's the only way you can shape the narrative. It's important to let people not know that the information is censored. They need to think they have the full picture. The best way to have a person not escape a prison cell is by not letting them know they are in one. Next, you need to manipulate education. Ban books, disallow certain topics to be talked about. Educated people will question you. Also create the sentiment that education is somehow bad. Next is propaganda. Doesn't have to be the truth, just important that people believe it and they can't look it up. It should of course also make you look good. Doesn't matter if you overdo it, I mean, what are they supposed to do? And if people disagree, you just threaten them. And as humans have this little annoying thing called empathy, make sure you do everything to avoid people feeling it. Dehumanize your opposition by avoiding every term that might make them look likable. Use the most vile words you know and create the narrative that danger is present with these people around. Remember, they are illegal, they are criminal, and they're the bad guys. The us versus them mindset needs to be in everybody's head. A good way is to just isolate communities. Next, laws. Just straight up make it illegal to be against you or just to question you. Make it illegal to be an opponent. Make your opponent's life as hard as possible. No. Get rid of your opponents. What if they protest? What if they disagree? There's a little trick, just don't show it to everyone because the press listens to only you after all. Did it really happen when nobody saw it? Next, make sure you are protected. You know the whole thing where we can't be held accountable for whatever we do? Make the government decisions and influences impossible to understand and make it very intransparent because the last thing we now need is transparency. And then control every communication channel. Tell people to report their families and friends if they speak up against you. And this is how you create a bystander society that doesn't think that they can speak up, that doesn't believe that they have power. A society living in a climate of fear, eroded democracy, and that was stripped from any collective efficacy. Racism is a sign of a broken society, as hate and discrimination don't work in a functioning country. Break a country, take advantage of them. This is how fascism works. The goal is never to improve the people's situation, but to exploit their fear for money and power. And see, this knowledge is part of German education. It is part of our culture of remembrance. It is what right-wingers will call the collective shame or guilt, but it is simply education. It is the cornerstone of our identity. It is woven into our fabric. The knowledge that we are not observers of history. We are participants. And if you now feel bad because of what happens, that shows that you care. And that is the spark it needs to want change. Usually I try to end my thoughts with an overarching suggestion for a solution, with a thought for us to all learn from, but there is no easy answer. I never thought it could even get this far again. I never thought people could fall for the old tricks. But again, you need to know about the tricks in the first place to recognize them. And I made the mistake thinking just because I got educated the way I did, everyone got educated the same way. I assumed everyone had seen the pictures and the videos of concentration camps and knew how terrible the consequences to this mindset would be. I assumed people are by default good and fierce in their heart, and I was wrong. And to come to terms with this is hard. How can we move on from this and believe in humanity? We can't be passive and watch. We can't wait to see what happens. It only took 2 or 3 months for Hitler to turn Germany into a dictatorship. We Germans were often asked how the Third Reich could have happened. How could we let it get so far? And now we stand here and we watch it happen again in real time. And now we can return the question, why aren't you doing something? How could you let it get that far? And it's a rhetorical question. You only need to answer that for yourself. For now, all I have is to know my friends, my family, and myself are safe. To show resistance where I can. To go to the election and vote against fascism. To tell people around me to go to the vote and not let them win. And again, it is the small things that may seem insignificant for the greater picture. But if everyone does their little part, maybe it makes a difference.